Jesus came into the world to introduce something brand new to the world. He did not come to extend something that was old. He did not come to simply complete the Bible so we'd have both a New Testament and an Old Testament. He didn't come to create Judaism 2.0. That he came to do something brand new to the world, brought something brand new to the world, and not just to the world, but for the world, as we're going to talk about today. Now, every headliner needs a warm-up act, somebody to come out and get the crowd all warmed up. And interestingly enough, in the first century, Jesus had a warm-up act. He really did. From the Jordan River basin, draped in animal skins with locust breath, please welcome, okay? John the Baptist steps onto the pages of history, really, literally, as the opening act for Jesus. Now, you've heard of John the Baptist. The reason he was called John the Baptist is not because he wasn't John the Methodist or John the Presbyterian or John the Episcopalian. He was called John the Baptist because John, as far as we can tell in history, this is pretty significant. John is the first person who ever manhandled another person and baptized them. Baptism at this point in the first century was part of a multifaceted process that a non-Jewish person would go through to become Jewish. There was a meal, there were things you had to learn, and then as part of becoming a Jewish person or being part of the covenant, you had to be baptized. And baptism was a ceremonial washing where you decide, I'm dying to my Gentileness and I'm coming alive to my Jewishness. But you did this alone, or you certainly, no one was touching you when you did this. And John the Baptist comes to the Jordan River and he's actually physically baptizing people. And so he got this nickname, John the Baptist, or John the Baptizer. Now, there are four accounts of the life of Jesus, as you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And Luke, who opens his account by saying, and you're going to hear me say this anytime I mention Luke, he opens his account by saying, I thoroughly investigated all of these things, and I have created for you a chronological account of the things, and I love this, of the things that happened in our midst, that happened here, that Luke was writing history. And here is his introduction to Jesus' opening act, John the Baptist. Here's how he put it. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, the emperor of Rome who followed Caesar Augustus, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, that whole area, Herod, tetrarch of Galilee, that other large area, his brother Philip, tetrarch of Iturea and Trachonitis, and Licinius, tetrarch of Abilene, during the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas. Now, if you ever read the Bible, you get to these parts and you go, yeah, whatever, let's get to the good part, right? This is extraordinary. Let me tell you why this is extraordinary. This is Luke saying to skeptics, fact check me, I dare you. In other words, this is not a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It doesn't really matter if it ever happened. I'm about to tell you a story. This is not once upon a time in a place you never heard of. Luke's saying, no. What I'm about to tell you happened in history, and what he does is remarkable because he's so meticulous. In fact, anytime we get to the teachings of Luke, there's so much detail. He is a historian's dream. He says, let me start at the macro level. The emperor of Rome, the governors of Judea and Galilee, the sub-governors of the province, the high priest of the temple in Jerusalem. Do I have your attention? Is everybody with me? Does everybody know what period of time I'm talking about and who these people are? And his first century audience was like, we are with you. And historians who don't even take the account of Jesus' life in Luke seriously are like, this is amazing stuff. And he goes on and he says this, here's what happened. The word of God came to John, this is John the Baptist, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. And people went out to him from Jerusalem and all Judea and the whole region of the Jordan. Now, Luke has thoroughly investigated these things, and here's what he's saying. He's saying, look, this isn't a dozen people listening to a crazy man preach on the side of the Jordan River, okay, on the bank of the Jordan River. All of Jerusalem, all of Judea. Judea was like this enormous area, and the whole region went out to see John. So thousands of people are going down to the middle of really nowhere that's difficult to get to, especially if you're from Jerusalem. If you were in Jerusalem, it would take, you'd have to get up before sunrise. You'd get there after sunset and hope the next day you could find this guy. So this is not a convenient trip. And on the banks of the Jordan River, John the Baptist begins to preach and teach, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people came, and this was a problem. This was a problem because every once in a while in Judea or Galilee, somebody would rise up and be a wannabe Messiah. And the Jewish leaders would have to try to calm them down before there was an insurrection, and then Rome would have to get involved, and then it was bloody, and then the Roman governor would have to sit down with the temple leaders and say, look, can you keep these people under control? Because if you can't keep them under control, we'll keep them under control. You won't like the way we keep them under control. And thanks to King Herod and his sons, things had gone along pretty well for a few years. And suddenly, on the banks of the Jordan River, there's this guy who's saying all kinds of things, preaching all kinds of things, and thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people in the region show up to listen to him. But it wasn't just the sermons that disturbed the temple leaders. They showed up confessing their sins. Now, this is unheard of. Now, we read this as English Bible readers in the 21st century. It's like, yeah, so what? No, this was unheard of. You see, the Jewish people in the first century and the centuries preceding the first century, they had a very sophisticated system for how you confessed your sins. There was a way you did this. There was an order of things. And ultimately, if you lived in the vicinity of Jerusalem, you went to the temple and you brought a sacrifice. And there were certain sacrifices and certain things that you sacrificed for certain kinds of sins, certain kinds of things you had to say to the priest or the high priest or the not so high priest or the priest assistant. Or you perhaps, if you didn't live close to Jerusalem, you went to the synagogue. But you found somebody in charge. You found an official. You found somebody with some authority. And you confessed your sin and you decided what you would have to do to be forgiven and what kind of hoops you would have to jump through, much like many religious systems have today. So here's a nobody in the middle of nowhere, and people are confessing their sins to him. He's acting like a walking, talking temple. You know, who is this guy? But it wasn't just confessing sins. It was the thing that gave him his nickname that was most disturbing at all. Not only did they confess their sins, and they were baptized by him in the Jordan River. Now, if you're going to be baptized within the context of what baptism meant in the first century, you had to have permission. You couldn't just show up and be baptized. How do we even know what that meant? And besides that, these are Jewish people, and Jewish people don't need to be baptized. They're already Jews. They're already part of the covenant of Abraham. This was so extraordinarily disruptive. No authority, no education, no backing, nobody behind him, no explanation. Just this wild-eyed, crazy preacher in the middle of nowhere making claims, and the whole countryside flocked to hear him. The text tells us that he came, John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, not John the Baptist, John that followed Jesus that ultimately wrote this down. He says he came, John the Baptist, came as a witness to testify. In the Greek, it's like he came as a witness to witness, or a testifier to testify, same word. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light. Because when John, the gospel writer John, referred to Jesus, it's so fascinating, we've talked about this. This is John who saw the whole thing, and we're going to talk a lot about John in the weeks to come. But John is an older man looking back as he tried to wrap his mind around the fact that Jesus, his friend, was a body, was a physical person, and yet he contained this light that was light for the whole world, so he used that imagery. John the Baptist came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. And John the Baptist, John testified concerning him. He cried out saying, this was John the Baptist now. This is what he was preaching about. This was his message. He cried out saying, this is the one, talking about Jesus, who hadn't shown up yet. This is the one that I spoke about when I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me. It's like, okay, what? Do what? John, you're going to have to back up. Yes, he who comes after me, he's not here yet, has surpassed me because he was before me. Okay, what are you talking about? John's like, okay, maybe I went through that too quickly. I'm just telling you, I got here first, but he got here before I got here, but you haven't seen him yet. And when he shows up, oh my goodness, get ready. And then a little foreshadowing. As John, the gospel writer John, describes John the Baptist's message. For the law was given through Moses. Now here comes the tension. Here comes foreshadowing of tension that will follow Jesus through his entire ministry. For the law was given through Moses, and as you know, in the first century, the law was everything to the Jews. For many Jews today, the law is still everything. And the law was housed in the temple in the Holy of Holies. It was the place that only the high priest could go once a year. And they tied a rope around his ankle. This is tradition, says they tied a rope around his ankle in case he died in there. They'd pull him out because nobody's going in there. And so in the temple is the Holy of Holies, and in the Holy of Holies is whatever was left over of the ark. By this time in history, there probably wasn't any part of the Ark of the Covenant left, but there was some semblance of the word or the text or the scripture, the Torah, the law of God. The law was everything. Moses was everything. Moses was the lawgiver. Rabbis could comment on the law of Moses, but you didn't create new laws. Rabbis could illustrate the law of Moses, but you didn't create new laws. You could talk about it, but you did not mess with it. The Jewish law governed every facet of Jewish life in the first century. People died for the Torah. People died to protect the temple. And so John says, looking back at this incident with John the Baptist showing up on the riverbank, he said the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. This was a contrast. Something new was in the works. Something new was coming. This is not an and. This is an instead of. Now, this was John's testimony. This was John's testimony when the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to ask him who he was. So here's what happened. So there's this big disturbance. All this stuff's going on the Jordan River. Nobody's shopping at the temple. Everybody's shopping down at the new mall, down by the river. So all the people up at the temple are thinking, what's going on? And all the temple leaders are nervous. So the temple leaders, the high priest and his folks, get sort of the underlings, the not so high priest and the not so cool Levites. And they say, look, it's a long way to the Jordan River. Would you go down there and find out what's going on, get a report, find out who this guy is, see if you can get an appointment with him, and then come back and tell us what's going on. Because, we don't want to go. We don't want to mess with that. It's a long way down there, and who knows what we would run into. And so the high priest in the temple in Jerusalem, a little bit more than a day's journey away, sends this group of people to find out who is John the Baptist and what is his message all about. And he, John, did not fail to confess, but confessed freely. And this is kind of the picture. I don't know if this is accurate, but the way it's written, it looks like John's doing his thing. He finishes his sermon, baptizes a few people, steps out of the Jordan River, and he sees the guys in the black robes all coming down with their cool tassels, and everybody's making a way for them because they carry authority. They've come from Jerusalem, and they're making their way toward him. And John knows what they're going to ask. They want to know, who are you and by whose authority are you doing these things and preaching these messages? And are you another wannabe pretend Messiah? Because those happen every once in a while. And if you claim to be the Messiah, you got to come to Jerusalem. We got to ask you a few questions and find out what's going on. So he knows what they've come to ask. And it's as if before they get to him and ask him the question, he goes ahead and he answers. And he says, I am not the Messiah. Before they can ask the question, I know what you're here for. No, I'm not the Messiah. So they said, well, then, are you Elijah? And the reason they ask, are you Elijah, is because the last book of the Old Testament, the Jewish scriptures, the Hebrew Bible, and the English version of it is Malachi. And Malachi was the last prophet. In fact, when Malachi finished, he turned off the lights, shut the door, and left. And God didn't say anything for 400 years, or there's no evidence or any written revelation from God for 400 years. But in Malachi, the prophet Malachi says, before God does his next big thing, before Messiah, before the great day of the Lord, there will be a prophet, Elijah, that comes in the spirit of Elisha, or perhaps a reincarnated Elisha, and he's going to come and prepare the people. So they're like, okay, well, if you're not the Messiah, are you the guy that comes before the Messiah? Are you Elijah? I said Elisha, but Elijah. And he says, nope, I'm not him. And they said, well, then are you the prophet? Because Moses and the Qumran community had taught that there would be some great prophet that rose up to prepare the people before God did something greater, his next big thing in the nation. And he answered, no, that's not who I am either. So finally they said, okay, enough with these silly questions. Who are you? Give us an answer to take back to those who send us. What do you say about yourself? I mean, we can't go back home and say, well, we know who he's not. We got to know who he is. We got to know whose authority and whose authority you're speaking, and where did you get these crazy ideas? And come on, you can't let people confess sin down here at the river. You confess sin up on the hill at the altar in Jerusalem. You're acting like a portable temple. What's up? Who are you? And John replied by quoting the prophet Isaiah. He said, I am, if you want to know who I am, I'm the voice. I'm just the voice. I'm not the guy. I'm not the one. I'm not the person. I'm just a voice of one calling in the wilderness. That's why I'm not in the temple. It's not why I'm not on the hill. I'm the voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord. In other words, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready. God is about to do his next thing. I'm just the warm-up act. I'm just here to gather the people and to get people to be prepared for what God is about to do. And those who have pure hearts will recognize what he's up to. And those who are ready and those who've repented of their sin and those who have opened their minds and opened to their hearts to the fact that God is about to do something new, those will be the people who recognize God's next move. And so that's why I'm here.